Welcome to another edition of 805 Sports Talk. Once again, I'm Joe Bailey. Alongside me is Elliott Stern. This is our 31st edition of our show, and we'll get right into it. So Friday night's a big game. Lompoc is at St. Joseph in a Los Padres League game. Earlier this week, I caught up with the Braves, who are 8-0 on the season. They did have 5 straight shutouts before beating Santa Ynez 48-3 last week in our webcast game. So that ended the 5-game shutout streak that the Braves had going. But I talked to them on Tuesday, and they're really looking forward to this game against St. Joseph. It's a really interesting matchup. You know, the Knights are coming off a bye week. The Braves are really talented, but the St. Joseph is really, matched up with them really nicely. I expect it to be a really good game. So I caught up with Lompoc, kind of got their thoughts on Friday night's matchup.
What do you guys got to do offensively against that team? They haven't allowed a point in their last 3 games. What do you guys got to do against St. Joseph to be successful offensively?
Well, I mean, obviously we got to get our run game going, and try to, keep CJ off the field and, control the clock. But more importantly is just we're going to have to throw the ball at some point, and we're going to have to get some completion. So we're going to have to get Shamar and Manzo and Cam going early to, basically keep them honest, Their defense is playing at a high level last 3 weeks. 3 shutouts, and they've been able to control just about everybody's run game. So that's going to be, another tough task for our offensive line and our backs.
Okay. What has impressed you most about your offense this year? It seems like Cameron, coming in, has hit some big throws. Shamar's just been great, and then the rushing attack with you guys every year is just awesome. What's been most impressive to you, with your 7th season here with this offense? What stands out to you?
I think honestly the biggest thing is, almost every team I've had, we were missing something, and like in 2012 we didn't really have a deep threat, and with Shamar and Johnny, like those guys can stretch the field. You have to keep them honest. Very rarely can you just go man-to-man and go single high, because we can just kind of auto-check to giving something to one of those guys. So that's been the kind of difference, and Cameron's been able to put it on them. So I think that's the biggest difference. Obviously, our offensive line's playing at a high level right now, so they got to continue to do that for us to be successful.
You guys are 8-0. The offense has been scoring a lot of points. You guys scored 48 points Friday night against Santa Ynez. How would you kind of rate the offense as a whole this year? You happy with everything? You've been hitting some big passes. Obviously, the ground game has been phenomenal this year. How would you kind of grade out that offense so far this season?
I would give it a pretty good grade. We're doing a good job of keeping our offense balanced this year. I know in recent years we've been more of a run-first team, which we still are. But we've done a good job of keeping the pass option open.
Yeah. Talk about how difficult that is when you don't get to throw a lot of passes in a game, and then they dial one up, and you got to hit a big throw. It seemed like you've been really consistent this year. Is it hard, getting that motion down and being ready to throw it, even though you don't get a lot of attempts per game?
Not really. I just know that I need to be ready to go when my number's called. And because we don't pass a lot when we do, I want to make sure we convert on those long passes. So.
Defense has been playing really well this year, but Santa Ynez did score 3 points against you last week, ended that shutout streak. How has the defense been playing overall this year? Just 27 points allowed in 8 games. How would you kind of sum up the defense this season?
We're solid. We got a couple good players on the defense this year.
Yeah, just a couple. I think you do have some new good players as well. Jelani came in playing at linebacker. I know Trent Carter's back with you guys. So there were some new pieces that kind of had to fit in this year. How's everybody kind of gelling and coming together so far this year?
We're gelling good. We all love each other. Jelani, he's a monster. Trent, he's a monster. They're both outstanding athletes. They fit right in.
Okay. And it seems like no matter who comes in here at Lompoc High School, and no matter where they're playing at, they got that same mentality. They're really aggressive, same type of athlete, really quick kind of guys. Where does that come from with you guys? I know you had some brothers that played here as well. Where's that come from with Lompoc football that just produce these athletes that are just kind of relentless, fearless, and really aggressive athletes? Where's that come from with you guys?
It starts from the YFL, honestly. All the coaching in the YFL, how good of a job they do in the YFL. Yeah. The coaching, they just teach us hard football. Never give up, just keep on hitting, play to the whistle.
what's it like playing that St. Joseph offense? You know, they're using kind of a little spread out, a little more option this year. What's it like playing that St. Joseph offense? And you're probably going to have to tackle CJ Cole quite a bit Friday night.
Yeah.
What's it like playing against those guys?
They're fast, so you always got to be on your cues. So we're just gonna do our assignments. Hopefully everything goes right. They play right into our strengths, so we'll see.
What do you try to do out there? You know, you're kind of one of the older guys now. You're a senior. You definitely provide some size for that defense and some strength. What do you try to bring to that defense that you guys have here?
Just make sure we're all doing our own job, you know, like making sure D-lineman, our job is just take down the running back, make sure he doesn't get anywhere, we control the middle, and then anything outside we let our linebackers deal with, our corners, our safeties. We just contain the middle, and then other guys do their job.
And what's it like to play on that defense? So many people flying around the ball, so much speed. What's it like being a part of that defense?
Well, it just leaves you one-on-one with your guy, because everybody else, they're trying to get to everyone else, to our defense, and then it's just not one person's making every tackle, and we all know that. We don't want all the tackles. We just want the win, and we got to do whatever you take.
So Lompoc is at St. Joseph Friday night, 7 p.m. That is our webcast game of the week. I'll be calling that one. Pregame show starts at 6:45 p.m. We'll talk about that matchup a little bit later in our show. Elliott, you're going to take us in a little bit different direction. You caught some rodeo action over the weekend.
Right. We have talked about football, and we'll do more. And there's golf and tennis, water polo, cross country, volleyball. There's lots of high school action, but rodeo is also underway. It's the second rodeo of the year for the high school District 7. That's Santa Barbara, San Luis, and Ventura counties. They call themselves the Magnificent Seven. They had 2 days of rodeoing at the Elks Unocal Event Center. Now they compete both high school and junior high rodeos while they're there. 8 high school events and a 2-day rodeo, and 18 junior high school events. They ran 8 of them in a 1-day rodeo Saturday and 10 on a 1-day rodeo Sunday. And this is real rodeo. There's no clown acts, there's no specialty acts, it's just rodeo. And how much? They went 10 hours Saturday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then 8 more hours on Sunday from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. It was just nonstop action. It was one group after another just riding and roping, alternating between the high school and junior high categories. So they crowned 26 champions. Now this was the second rodeo of the year for District 7 high schoolers, and because they do 2 1-day rodeos at a time for the junior high, it was their 3rd and 4th. It was a lot of fun to be out there. One of the kids, there were actually 2 in the junior high that I wanted to mention, McKenna Machado and Haley Grant. McKenna Machado, who's from the Machado family, her older brothers Chance and Cutter have been high school champions for years. McKenna won the barrel racing on Saturday and came in 2nd on Sunday, and then that flip-flopped with Haley Grant. Haley Grant came in 2nd on the barrel racing on Saturday and won it on Sunday. Now Haley Grant, you might remember if you're longtime Santa Maria Times readers, the first time we put her in the newspaper was when she was a barrel racer at the age of 2. That was 9 years ago, and that young lady is now 11 years old and competing on her own. And they weren't the only ones, the only women in the spotlight this weekend, but the other group I want to talk to you about was a little bit older. Some of them were 90 years old. They have a display at the Santa Maria Historical Society Museum that's up on South Broadway, and it's going to be going through the whole month, and you're looking there at a group photo of the people that were there. In the middle were 3 players from the Santa Maria Valleyets and the Guadalupe Rockettes, 89-year-old Mickey Freeman and 2 90-year-olds, Dorothy Oliveira and Betty Silva. Behind them was the 1981 Orcutt Express national champions, which were led by Tracy Compton, who's now married and known as Tracy Davis. She also won several CIF championships for Rigetti and 3 national championships at UCLA. And then in the foreground there were a bunch of younger players, and they're the next generation. They all came together to open the display this weekend, and it'll be going on all month at the Santa Maria Historical Society Museum. That's on South Broadway, right in the same complex with the Chamber of Commerce. So it's not just high school that's in the spotlight, but some of the older things. There's a great display. You should see it. You've got to stop on by and take a look at some of the memorabilia. But now we're going to talk back to football. There's a lot of crucial games coming up this last 2 weeks of the season, and the big game this week, of course, is when Lompoc tries to keep its record perfect at St. Joe.
Yeah, we saw the Braves move to 8-0 last week with our webcast game when they played at Santa Ynez. You know, we hyped that one up quite a bit. Didn't know what to expect. I think most people were expecting Lompoc to be heavy favorites, but they came away with a 48-3 win. It was just 7-0 after the first quarter, 21-0 at halftime, but then the Braves just rolled away in that second half. They did allow a field goal, and that ended their 5-game shutout streak. It was actually 24 consecutive quarters without allowing a point. Lompoc went. So that streak is over, but talking to the coaches of Lompoc and the players earlier this week and after that game, they didn't really care that shutout streak ended. They're not really focused on that stuff. They're just happy with the win. Isaac Black especially said that, as you saw in the interviews. He's just happy to get a win. That's pretty much the mentality of these Braves. And so we're looking ahead to Friday night's game against St. Joseph. You know, we're going to hype that one up as well. But I'm thinking it's going to be a closer matchup. You know, the Knights are just 5-3. Santa Ynez was 7-0 heading into last week's matchup, but St. Joseph has looked really well the last couple games. In fact, they haven't allowed a point in their last 3 games. They're rolling in the LPL so far. They beat Cabrillo 50-0. Before the league play started, they beat Slow handily 41-0, and then we saw them beat Pioneer Valley 2 weeks ago 33-0, and CJ Cole had 300 rushing yards in that game. So both these teams are just on a roll of momentum, and I think it's going to be a really good game Friday night. Just two heavyweights on a collision course, so I'm expecting a really interesting game Friday night at J. Will Stadium in Orcutt. Elliott, you've seen both these teams throughout the year. You know, we talked to Andrew Jones before the season started. We talked to Dustin Davis before the season started. Here we are, 9 weeks later, and these two teams are meeting up, and it probably will decide a league championship. And they've just been playing really well throughout the season. So how do you feel about this matchup Friday night?
I think Lompoc is just too strong. We got the teams together, like you said, for the preseason. We've been doing that a couple of years now, and it's a great event where all the teams get together. We get to talk to the players and the coaches and see how things are shaping up before they even hit the field. And on that day, you were talking to Andrew Jones, and you got him to smile. Now, you never see him smile. And they gave up 3 points, and he was not happy. It's not that he really wants to have shutouts every week, but what he wants to do is have his team play with an intensity. And the one thing Santa Ynez did was they moved the ball on Lompoc. And St. Joe was studying that game. They didn't score. They only got the 3 points, but they moved the ball, and they had a couple of their own mistakes that cost them opportunities for touchdowns. And Andrew Jones was typically not happy with a 48-3 win because there were too many mistakes and things that they need to clean up. On the other side of the ball, you mentioned how well St. Joe's been doing, and they're a tough squad, and they play a tough preseason schedule so that they should be ready for teams like Lompoc, and they had the week off. And Dustin Davis told me that they were going to need every bit of that so that they could prepare, so they could see what the Lompoc is doing in their latest games, and they already know they've got people like Toa Tower that they're going to have to contend with. That offensive line is just immense, and they've got to find a way to, when they open those holes, to stop them with the linebackers before Tower breaks one free and goes 67 yards for a touchdown. I see Lompoc as just too strong, but St. Joseph might give Lompoc a better game of it than Santa Ynez, but I could see another 48 on Lompoc's side, but maybe a 14 this time around for St. Joe. I think they'll give them a good matchup, and it'll be a slow start for Lompoc. They won't just go on a scoring tear, but I just see Lompoc with the offensive weapons they have and the defense and their specialty teams. I think that maybe we might be able to get Andrew Jones to smile after this one.
Yeah, if you remember last year's game between St. Joseph and Lompoc, St. Joe was actually up 21-7 at halftime at Houck Stadium, and we webcast that game, and then Lompoc, just rolled back, and I think they ended up winning 42-21, something like that. So Lompoc is, they can be down and they can come back, or they can, keep it tight and then pull away. So Lompoc can play any type of ball game And we saw that last week against Santa Ynez. And another note about last week's game, it was a lot of fun sitting next to Donnie Cross up in the press box, listening to him call a game on defense. You know, he's a pretty intense guy, and every little thing that one of his players did wrong, he was not happy about. So it was good to kind of listen in and see how he kind of operates over there. And he's just a great defensive coach. And then being at practice on Tuesday of this week at Lompoc was a lot of fun, just seeing Andrew Jones run the offense and all the little keys that the guys have. You know, it's just, he prepares so well. I don't think a lot of people do that. If you want to know why Lompoc is so good, go to a practice for about an hour or so. Just watch how they operate. You know, everybody's in their spot. Everybody's got to do the job. And if a guy is running 1 yard to the left, Andrew Jones will be like, you got to cut that in. You got to pinch down. You know, he's just so meticulous in his preparation. It's really cool. And that's just an hour of practice. You know, there's times where he's, you know, game planning before school, after school, during school, and stuff like that. So there's so much preparations that goes into these games from both teams. So it's really fun to see, you know, Coach Jones get ready for this game. I'm sure Dustin Davis prepares just as much. So there's so much preparation that goes into these games. We don't always get to see that because we put so much time, you know, preparing for the actual games and covering the games. We don't get to see all that preparation. So it's going to be a great game Friday night. Be sure to tune in 6:45 p.m. on SantaRetimes.com. But moving to the loser of that Lompoc game, Santa Ynez, they got to get ready for Pioneer Valley. You know, we saw the same thing last year with Santa Ynez. They started out 7-0. Lost to Lompoc and then ended up 7-3. So they got to make sure that doesn't happen this year. And they play Pioneer Valley at Pioneer Valley Friday night. And I think this is Santa Ynez has to win this game. They're the better team. Pioneer Valley has just lost 4 straight. You know, they're spiraling downward. They lost 39-7 at Cabrillo last Friday night. So Santa Ynez is a favorite to beat Pioneer Valley. They got to bounce back. I know they lost to Lompoc, but the Pirates got to beat Pioneer Valley, and they got to, you know, maybe they still could finish second in the LPL with the win over St. Joseph at the end of the season. So, Elliott, what do you think about that Santa Ynez at Pioneer Valley matchup set for Friday night?
Well, I think if Santa Ynez regroups, they'll win the game. They can't spiral the way Pioneer Valley has. If you look at Santa Ynez last year, as you mentioned, they just dropped the last 3 games. They see that there's a shot at the playoffs, if not necessarily the league championship anymore. So they need to get their act back together. Pioneer Valley has some talent. They've got a good quarterback, and they've got some tall receivers, and I've seen them just play an alley-oop game where they throw it over the defense and they score a lot of points. Can they do that against Santa Ynez? They'll have a height advantage on the wide receiver side, so they should be able to get there, but they've shown a tendency to be off and on their running game. Some weeks they have a great running game. Other weeks they can't get past the line of scrimmage. I think Santa Ynez has got it in their heads this year that they're going to regroup and win this one, because that showdown against St. Joe is going to be really important for second place and playoff possibilities and playoff seeding. So they've got to remotivate themselves. They're going to be on the road. They lost at home last week. They're going to be on the road, but they both play in almost identical stadiums. It's not as though they're changing the field surface or anything. They should be very comfortable at Pioneer Valley. And it's not a long ride. It's not like they got to worry about getting their sea legs or anything. So I think St. Joe's going to come out on top. I think McCoy is Mike McCoy is too talented to stay in the doldrums. I think he'll bounce back fine, and he'll bring the kids with him. Gabe Prendergast and those guys will rise up to this challenge, and I think they'll beat Pioneer Valley. I don't think it'll be a blowout, but I think it'll be a win.
Yeah. Santa Ynez actually didn't, you mentioned it earlier, they did move the ball in Lompoc a bit. You know, McCoy ended up 15-26 for like 160 yards. Prendergast had over 100 yards receiving on just 3 catches. So they did get going a little bit. They just weren't able to finish off drives against Lompoc and, you know, do it enough consistently. So I think Santa Ynez should beat Pioneer Valley. I know Josh McClurg is going to get those guys fired up, and they're going to bounce back. And if I had to pick a lock, that's definitely a lock. Santa Ynez at Pioneer Valley, I would go Santa Ynez. Nothing against Pioneer Valley, because I really like those guys. I like Coach Ruiz, Matthew Garcia, and Leo Partida Ruiz. Getting to know those guys at the beginning of the season, I had high hopes for them. But, you know, sometimes it just doesn't go your way. Injuries, or, you know, just some unit just wasn't strong enough this year. I think maybe with Pioneer Valley was maybe that offensive line, because Alcantar's a strong runner, Michael Bourbon's a strong runner. They just haven't been able to get that consistent downfield north-south running game going this year. So maybe Pioneer Valley can finish out strong and pull off a couple upsets. They do play Rigetti at the end of the year in a non-league game. But talking about Rigetti and moving to the Pac-5 league, the Warriors host Paso Robles Friday night. Paso, we saw, started out 5-0 I think on the season, but they lost to Sierra Canyon, then lost to AG. So they're still a really good team. Rigetti just has one win on the season. It's going to be a real tough battle for those Warriors. They moved John Lerone at quarterback. They lost 52-7 at Arroyo Grande last week. So, it's just going to be a tough game for the Warriors. They just got to do what they do and, try to keep it respectable. Paso Robles is going to win that game. There's really not much Rigetti can do about it. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes they're just a better team. But Rigetti, they've impressed me with just how they keep going. Ed Herman keeps their guys going. They've had some pieces there, Jalen Davis has been good at receiver. Damian Robles can show you some flashes at running back, and John Lerone has been good. And Justin Frazier, a guy who doesn't get a lot of credit. He didn't play last year, but he's linebacking for those guys this year. He looked pretty solid. He got to carry the ball a little bit earlier in the year, play some tight end, fullback. So Frazier's been good. Rigetti, they're going to try to finish out the season playing as strong as they can, and moving ahead to next week when they get to play Pioneer Valley, and that kind of rivalry game should be a lot of fun. So there's still a lot to play for Rigetti. They might not get another win. They probably will go winless in the Pac-5 league besides the win over SLO. But they're going to keep fighting. They got a couple games left here. And Elliott, what do you think about that matchup? Rigetti hosting Paso. It's a tough Pac-5 league matchup.
Yeah, I've seen them both play. I talked to Coach Ed Herman of Rigetti on Monday, and the kids are still fighting. They're still a team. There's not. You see, like pro teams, when things fall apart, they become awful human beings. It's not like that at all. The Rigetti kids are still solid with each other. They still have each other's backs, and they're still going to give it everything they can. Morale is high, but it's a tough season for them, and they don't have any illusions about how much better than they could be than against Paso Robles. I saw Paso play Arroyo Grande earlier this season when in the first league game, and I said at the time that was probably the game for the league championship, and it really was. And Paso, though, can score points. They at the end of the game, they scored 2 touchdowns in the last 6 minutes of the game to close it to 35-28, but there wasn't any time left for that one. But they have a strong running game, they have a strong passing game, and I just think they just have way too much for for Rigetti this year, and Rigetti's just going to have to look to next year and look to next week, because they think they have a chance of winning the battle for the helmet at Pioneer Valley. They see how Pioneer Valley's doing, and Pioneer Valley has more wins than they do, but Rigetti's played a tougher schedule, and they think that they could win that one. But they're going to go into the game this weekend against Paso Robles thinking they're home. It's their final home game of the season. It's senior night, and they want to win it, and they want to go out with their last home game with a win. I think they'll be a little bit more competitive than they've been, but I don't see how they can pull this one out.
Yeah, the other Pac-5 league game Friday night is the Atascadero at Arroyo Grande. Arroyo Grande hasn't lost since they lost to Lompoc in week 0, and you talked about that Paso game being the Pac-5 championship game, and I think you're right, but Atascadero is not no pushover, definitely not a cupcake. So I think Arroyo Grande has to do what it does, just play a well-managed game, not try to get too crazy with it. And Sawyer May has been running the ball well. Cameron Johnston, James Gomet, all those guys have been running the ball, and I expect them to do that against Atascadero. But they're going to have to work for that one. Atascadero is not just some pushovers. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. I think Arroyo Grande is going to win that one, and then beat SLO to close out the season and be 9-1 and 4-0 in the Pac-5 league and get a really good seed for the playoffs. But they're going to have to work to beat Atascadero Friday night. I
agree. I've liked Atascadero all year. I've ranked them in our top 10 poll fairly high and consistently because they're a good team. Their problem is they've got to play Arroyo Grande and Paso Robles, and I figured when they played Paso it was for second place, and it was. So I don't see how Atascadero can beat them, but I think Atascadero is going to be a really good challenge for Arroyo Grande, and they're going to need it because they close the season with San Luis Obispo, and San Luis Obispo is not going to win a game at all this year. They lost to Rigetti, and they're not going to come close to Arroyo Grande in 2 weeks. But I think Atascadero has, I don't know if I give them a shot, but they will be competitive. It could be a 28-14, 28-21, but you never know when Sawyer May and those guys get clicking, and Sam Ness on defense. He leads that defensive unit, and they shut people down. Maybe they're not as tough as Lompoc has been, but they're the only team to score more than 10 points this year against Lompoc. So I don't see anybody slowing Arroyo Grande down, and I don't see a shutout, but I don't see a whole lot of points on the scoreboard for the Greyhounds.
Yeah, those 14 points Arroyo Grande scored against Lompoc in week 0 look more and more impressive because they allowed just 13 points since then. So that's just insane. They allowed 10 points to Napomo and then 3 points last Friday night. So those 14 points AG put up is impressive. And one weapon Atascadero does have is Elijah Cooks. Many people in the area know Elijah Cooks, the younger brother of Mariah Cooks, the star basketball player at Rigetti. He was at St. Joe for a little bit, even played some quarterback, but he turned into just a star tight end at Atascadero. Probably going to be, he definitely will be playing Division I football at some point. I think he might end up at Wyoming, but Elijah Cooks has just been a stud tight end. So somebody from Arroyo Grande has to cover him Friday night, and hopefully he doesn't get too many yards, but he will likely get his. So that's going to be a key matchup, see what AG does to cover Elijah Cooks. Moving on to the Northern League, we got to take a second to talk about Santa Maria's win over Morro Bay last week. They beat the Pirates 35-14 in a Northern League game and moved to 5-4 on the season. So a big win for the Saints, and Morro Bay is going to play at Napomo Friday night. But just that win Santa Maria had, I think it goes a long way for the Saints clinching a playoff spot. They pretty much have third place locked up there in that Northern League. So big win for the Saints, and they got a bye week this week, and then they close out the season against Napomo. That's going to be a tough matchup, but here we are toward the end of the season, and the Saints have a winning record. I don't think we've been able to say that in a very long time. So congrats to the Saints to moving to 5-4 on the season with that win at Morro Bay.
Well, Coach Dan Ellington was telling the truth when this year began. He said they had what it takes to win games and make the playoffs, and look at them, 5-4. Now, they're not going to lose this week because they have their week off. It's their bye week, and they're going to need that because I was talking to Dan Ellington Monday, and he said what they needed is to really get everything clicking just right, because they think they have a shot at beating Napomo on November 4th in their season finale. They'll be hosting that game. And they think that this could be the year they could beat Tony Dodge's Napomo Titans. But I don't see the Morro Bay team being anywhere near as talented as Napomo. Morro Bay, again, they started off looking really good this year, but I think it was an artificial record because they weren't playing any strong teams, and once they started playing some real competition, they haven't looked good at all. And I see Napomo, they started off a little bit rocky, and they've got their ship in the right direction, and I see this as a big win. I mean, a big score this time around for Napomo and the Titans, and they should win the league, or could win the league, but Santa Maria is going to give them a real challenge in 2 weeks.
Yeah, Napomo's been a real interesting kind of case study this year. They've been up and down. They started the year with the 35-14 loss to PV, and then we saw last week they beat Mission Prep 45-6. So that was I thought Napomo would win that game, but 45-6, I did not see that coming. So Napomo, once again, we see they have that momentum toward the end of the season. It's been like that the last 2 years. They went all the way to the semifinals last year, nearly made the finals, and then they won a CIF championship the year before that. So something happened over there with Napomo where toward the end of the season, they just put it all together and really get clicking, and we see that. And I'm sure we'll see it Friday night. They host Morro Bay. That's going to be a blowout for Napomo. It should be. I'd be very surprised if Morro Bay is in that game. And you kind of talked about that Napomo Santa Maria game next week is going to be real interesting, because if you're in Santa Maria's shoes right now, you could either be in third place with the loss, or you could force a tri-championship with the win over Napomo, because I think Mission Prep, Santa Maria, and Napomo would all be 3-1 in the Northern League, and they all have wins over each other, kind of. So it's very complicated, but it could end up in a tri-championship. So, here Santa Maria is 1 game to go, and they could finish. The worst they can do pretty much is finish third in that league, and they could even force a tri-championship. So it's just been a crazy year for Santa Maria. And you look at that lost to Pioneer Valley. They lost 13-10, so close. Yeah. Pioneer Valley hasn't won a game since beating Santa Maria, and Santa Maria almost should have beat Cabrillo, which that win is pretty impressive with the way Cabrillo played last week, beating Pioneer Valley 39-7. So if they got those two wins right there, I mean, they would be 7-3 possibly at the end of the season, something like that. So
at one point, Dan Ellington said we could be 5-1 or 1-5. Mm-hmm. And it's just the little things here and there that they had to clean up. Looks like they've cleaned them up, and a tri-championship would be phenomenal. They haven't had a winning record since before you went there, and you've been out of Santa Maria High School for a long time now. Not quite as long as I've been out of high school, but it is really good to see it, because I said to Dan Ellington last year, the only thing this program needs is consistency at the top. We need a coach to come in here and stay here, and not one of these guys that just pays lip service to, I'm going to come here and I'm going to stay here and build tradition, and then they're gone. One of them was even gone shortly after he said it without even coaching one game. So Ellington has brought a system with him. He's brought some quality coaching with him, and he's got the kids not only buying into it, they're loving it. I talked to Isaiah Garcia the other day, and the enthusiasm around this group is something like I've never seen in 16 football seasons that I've been covering these kids. They're just sky high. So they have an extra week to prepare. And remember now, the way they've redone it, it's not like the Northern League goes into one playoff group. They've ranked them by strength of schedule, size of school. So Santa Maria is not in the same division in the playoffs as Napomo or Mission Prep. So they can get a pretty high playoff seeding, and all three of those teams could make the playoffs just in different divisions. So I want to see it. I want to be at that first Santa Maria playoff game, although I might have to arm wrestle you for it.
Definitely. That's what's good about that competitive equity stuff that you talked about right now. It's good for those programs like Santa Maria, because they have a chance now. They were in the LPL before, they're in the Northern League, which is tough for them. So they're all grouped together. But now Santa Maria's in Division 12, the next to last division. That gives them some hope. They get to the playoffs, they can win a game there. They might host a playoff game. So that's what the real good stuff is about the competitive equity and the changes that the CIF Southern section made was for those schools like Santa Maria, who didn't really stand a chance in the LPL and was really out of its league. Now they're in the right league. Now they're in the right division for those playoffs. So, Santa Maria's, relaxing this week, and they got a bye week, but they got Napomo the following week, and then they'll probably have a playoff game the next week, and maybe even a playoff game at home, which would be crazy. I'm sure those fans over there would love to see a playoff game at Santa Maria High School for football. We've seen them for soccer and basketball and stuff like that, but to have a home football game in the playoffs would be huge. Yeah,
and it will then not only make everything that Dan Ellington said way back in August come true, but he can now point to this with the kids and say, look what you guys did. And we're going to lose some real talented kids to graduation. It's the nature of high school. But we've got a bunch of you guys coming back, a bunch of kids coming up from the freshman team, kids coming into the freshman program that might be good enough to make this team, and we're going to continue this. And they don't have to learn a new system next year. They don't have to deal with a whole new coaching staff. They can come in and have a really high comfort and confidence level. And so I'm looking forward to it. I think, right now I'm thinking Dan Ellington's Coach of the Year. Yeah. I mean, Andrew Jones at Lompoc and Tom Goosen at Arroyo Grande have wonderful records. The only loss on either of their records is Arroyo Grande's season opening loss to Lompoc. But they shouldn't be Coach of the Year because that's expected of those programs. They've both got powerhouses. They've both got strong traditions. What nobody really expected was that Dan Ellington could back up those words that he told us in August, that we're going to compete not only for the league championship, but we're going to get into the playoffs, and they're doing it. So I'm really impressed with the work he's done. And something could be said, too, for J.J. Willis, is it, at Cabrillo. That program was in turmoil in the middle of the season, and they got a week off now before they have to go up, unfortunately, against the Lompoc Braves in their big game. But they were awful, and they won a couple games, and then they went through turmoil, and now it looks like the new coach Willis has these kids pointed in the right direction and has restored the confidence of those kids. So there's another guy that's done a great job and should get some compliments and kudos for the work he's done with that program to bring these kids back to where they feel good about themselves and their team again. So that's another guy that I think has done an impressive job. Cabrillo, Santa Maria are off this week. Valley Christian, they're in a strange place. Their season is over, but they have one more game to play. Now, how do you do that? Your season is over, but because one of the teams pulled out earlier in the year, they could actually play one more game without any penalties. But everybody's full up except the Mission Prep junior varsity team. So they're going on the road Friday night to play Mission Prep in a game that doesn't actually count for anything except nobody violates any rules because they don't exceed the 9-game limit that they have in 8-man football. So they're off, but they're not. They'll be playing up at Mission Prep, and that ought to be fun. Pete and his longtime assistant coach, Randy Stanford, promised they'll call in and tell us what happened, but it won't affect how their season is going. But there is one 8-man game that will be happening. It's Orcutt Academy's season finale. It's also their senior night, and it's at Santa Maria because they always play their home games on the Santa Maria fields or the Santa Maria Public School fields. So they rotate between Pioneer Valley, Rigetti, which is in the school district considered Santa Maria, and Santa Maria High School. So they're going to be hosting Villanova Prep Friday night. This is a game that could determine whether they get to the playoffs or not, although the Orcutt Academy is in the top 10 in the Division 8-man Division 1. So they think that they can knock off Villanova Prep. I talked to Doug May the other day. He thinks they can do it, but Villanova is a really strong program, and they could win the league championship with this win. So this is a toss-up. I'm going to flip a coin and say Orcutt Academy is going to win it because they got the home field, but it wouldn't surprise me if it goes either way.
Yeah, I think with the Orcutt Academy, it really depends on how they're doing health-wise. Darren Miller, the quarterback, was really probably one of the best 8-man quarterbacks you'll see in the state, and he's been banged up, and they've been dealing with so many injuries this year. So hopefully, if they can stay healthy, I'm sure they'll make the playoffs, and I think they'll beat Villanova Prep. If they had their full squad, they definitely would. So we'll see how they are health-wise Friday night against Villanova Prep. But that's an 8-man game Friday night at Santa Maria High School.
They've got the Carpenter twins, Cole and Mitch, they're so tall. They're 6'4", and they can just do the alley-oop play to those guys and score a lot of points. Remember, it's 8-man, so there's lots of holes. There's lots of space on the field. But Cole had to go in a quarterback last week, and that changes the dynamic. He did a nice job, but if he can go back with his twin brother at wide receiver, they'll be a far more dangerous team. So I guess really it depends on who's at quarterback, whether I like them or not. But it's going to be a good game either way.
Yeah. So that's all we got for this week. Remember, Friday night, 6:45 p.m. That is our game of the week at J. Will Stadium in Orcutt. The Knights are hosting the Braves, so be sure to tune in at SantaMariaTimes.com. And thank you guys for tuning in once again for 805 Sports Talk. And follow us on all our social media accounts throughout the weekend, especially on Friday nights. On Twitter, we'll be updating scores from across the Central Coast.
And, of course, check out the website every day online. We have all the high school sports, and they're posted online. As soon as we are done with the stories, we put them up there. And you can read everything in the Santa Maria Times, the Lompoc Record, Santa Ynez Valley News. So join us online or in print, but join us. And thank you for being with us. We'll see you next week for another edition of 805 Sports Talk.